Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome to another episode of the Arc of Thoughts podcast. In today's episode, Kasim, we're going to talk about leadership within the Muslim community. But I think some of the things that I want to talk about and that I want to cover is maybe like the structure of leadership within the Muslim community, within our Masajid in Britain, the sort of balance of power, so to speak, responsibilities, um, the good that's obviously being done, like we always like to emphasize, as well as some points that, what we have seen through our own observations, um, and what we feel might be important changes. I think what's really important to mention here is myself and Kasim have never been involved in leadership in the Masajid themselves per se. So obviously take our opinions with a pinch of salt, if you must. There are some things that we might talk about which you can take and are going to be really important and going to they're going to be applicable to every masjid. On the other hand, there are going to be some things which you might not agree with, which are nuances at the end of the day, which are our opinions and our own thoughts about how things should maybe progress. So, in the case where you disagree with us, then feel free to, inshallah, mention in the comments some solutions that you might have, um, and what your thoughts are about the current way that masajid are run in general, and where we can potentially move forward as a community to serve the Muslims within this country better. So, I think the first thing to mention here is that up until this point, alhamdulillah, there have been many institutions and masajid established within the UK, who provide benefit to the Muslim community. And facilities such as, like, there are certain things we take for granted within our community. For example, like ghusl facilities and the washing and enshrouding of dead bodies, cemeteries, things like this. Like, sometimes we don't even think about, and we only need to think about at the time when there's a death within our family. These things have been taken care of by members within our own community, within the masajid, who provide facilities, and that's all fantastic. On the other hand, you have areas that are in the UK where unfortunately there's a Muslim community, but they don't have these facilities and they really struggle. So we have to talk about and we have to celebrate the establishment of the masajid as they are already. The money that has been put in and sacrifices that have been given. I think we've already talked about some of that within the previous episodes as well. I think the first and foremost thing that we need to talk about is, what is the purpose of leadership and management in the masajid? Okay. I think primarily I want to mention first, and I'm going to pass over to you afterwards, is primarily the first and foremost thing that any leader, any management within a masjid, not just leaders and management, but any person that's involved within a masjid in any way, shape, or form, whether it just be the person that goes to the masjid to perform ibadah, okay, and to perform the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the primary focus for every single one is to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether you're the leader of the masjid, whether you're the imam, whether you're musalli, whether you're even a little child coming to pray, the primary focus of every single person is the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that should be our intention, that should be our goal, that should be firmly embedded within our hearts. And that, inshallah, provides the sincerity to go forward and to try and conduct the right actions afterwards. So I think that's like the firm intention should be there. And that should be the purpose as well of stepping forward into these roles as well, that you have certain qualities, you have certain abilities that you can offer to the masjid, to the community, through which you will seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But beyond that, obviously not every action that we conduct and not everything that we do has only one intention or one goal. We have multiple reasons why we do things, and there are multiple intentions that we should have and multiple objectives that we should try to fulfill. So Kasim, like, what are your thoughts? What is the purpose of a leader or leaders or management within the masajid? And, like, obviously we'll get into this a bit more as well, but the different types of leaders or different types of managements that exist, and the different personalities that should be there.
For me, like, looking at it from a very simplistic point of view, is that the life of a Muslim should revolve around the masjid, ideally. And the roles for leaders or committees or for shuras or for these sort of things to be in place is to ultimately facilitate the ease of a Muslim and make his life easy, or her life easy. Sorry, yeah, thank you for that. In terms of having access to the masjid, in terms of coming to the masjid, being able to fulfill the duties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not feeling any sort of, how do I say, not feeling any sort of hardship in doing that. Okay, so the leadership, the people who are leading the community or leading the Masajid or the committee, they should have this thought in mind: is that how can we facilitate or make our Masajid the best sort of place that everybody wants to come towards? And for me, like we're going to get into this later, is that how can we make our Masjid not just a place of salah, but in terms where the entire community comes together, and where a person can ultimately make like his refuge towards. Because so many times that when you read, from the Seerah of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or even you read the Quran, is that we are told all the time, to seek refuge in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and best place to do that is the Masjid.
Yep. So I think one of the things that I wanted to mention as a purpose for leadership and management is to take care of the facilities. So the leadership and the management will generally be running the masjid, the facilities that are within the masjid, such as, for example, the wudu facilities, the facilities for ghusl of the dead, burial facilities, the area of prayer for men and for women, and the other things that are sort of linked with the masjid. And this is where the leadership and management, one of their primary roles is to maintain these facilities. Over here, I think I want to put in a little caveat as well, that the purpose is to maintain and to look after the facilities so that they are ready to pass on to the next generation in the same state that it was received, if not better. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that in terms of the facilities, it's 5-star. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not necessarily saying here that there should be chandeliers hanging. And if a masjid does do that or has the ability to do that, then so be it. For example, recently, the Cambridge Eco Masjid, I'm sure you've heard of it and seen it. For those who haven't seen it, in Cambridge, there was a new masjid that was built recently. And it's one of the masjids in the world, if not the only masjid in the world, which is almost very close to net zero carbon. The way that the masjid was produced was like magnificent. Like the lighting that they use during the day is the sunlight. They have like these wooden trees that they've created, which essentially are the structure of the masjid. Various different rooms, facilities. They collect the rainwater. The rainwater is filtered to use for wudu. They have like a fantastic garden that's outside. But at the end of the day, not every masjid in the UK has the funding or the ability or the space to do that, and they shouldn't need to.
And I want to butt in here. I want to mention this, that from what I've seen generally across the UK, like you got to give your hands to many committees. Like they provide amazing facilities. Better things that we can find out in our own houses. But just to mention this here is that the Masajid is not for the local people to come and use the facilities. Most of the time it's for people who are working or for travellers. We as the local people in our community should not be utilising our masjid that much in terms of its facilities as much as outside people. Why? Because we live at home. We should be making our wudu from home. We should be utilising the things at home, making the life of the committee even more easier. Because every time we use the water in the masjid or we even use the bathrooms or stuff like this is actually money which is being taken out. Or we already know ourselves how much money we put inside the masjid as well. I just sometimes want to mention it's very important, because the committees on the side, they do an excellent job of this. You've got to give your hands up to it.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the point that we tried to make here, and I think like, I'm thinking back to a time when I spoke to a scholar about this, and he mentioned a really profound point. He said the masjid should, in a particular area, should reflect the Muslims who live in that area. So, for example, let's say the masjid is within an area where the people are very well off, mashallah. Then the masjid should reflect that. That shows that the people take pride within their masjid and they're putting in the money for the facilities to be grand, for example. On the other hand, if the community that the masjid is in is unfortunately in an area which is not of a high socioeconomic status, then the masjid doesn't need to be like a superstar masjid and super grand and stuff. It just needs to cater for the community which it is in. If that means that you need more space, that means you need more space. I know that some people are going to disagree on that point and say, well, if a community has so much money, then they shouldn't just be investing it within the infrastructure and the building. They should be investing it in activities and solving issues which require finance within the community. And I 100% agree on that as well.
I'd probably disagree with you on that. So, like, if you have money, yeah, I'm not spending, but spending in the right places, spending what is needed. Yeah, making masjid look nice and stuff, but you don't need to go over the top where the things they're not needed. For example, you don't need maybe £100,000 Chantilly, for example, when that money can be spent. Your mosque will look nice without it as well.
Yeah,
you understand what I mean?
Yeah. So I think just running through some of the things that we've jotted down about the leadership and management and what else it should do. One of the things that I mentioned was like maintaining a relationship with the local community. This includes, like, for example, the local council. You need to maintain good ties of relationship with your local council, as well as, for example, like emergency services and police. Especially like when it comes to security risks and problems in which there might be far right activists who want to destroy the masjids or cause harm to the masjids, then maintaining ties with the emergency services really helps our cause. If the management of the masjid are proactive and keep these relationships, then naturally the emergency services are going to be even more helpful in looking after us at the same time. What else do you think like forms part of that?
Just on that point, like, I remember a few years ago, in our community, it was very, very sad, but there was a young boy, I remember he passed away because of a car accident. And the masjid, actually, they brought in, the police, and they had a talk for the youngsters just about the issue of just driving cars and you're driving recklessly and the harm that you can cause. And I thought that was brilliant, to be honest. The fact that they actually got in touch with the local police and they came in and they had a talk and they gave them a platform and put things into perspective and stuff. So I think we need more of that, to be honest.
Yep.
Yeah,
definitely. So the other thing is, like, the Masaajid, they have a large number of donations that come into the masjid, whether that be through Jummah, whether that be through the local community regularly donating, or whatever other means there are. That money is a trust, it's an amana. Okay, and the use of that money is also within the hands of the leadership and management. And we all know that we will be questioned about the money, the wealth that we acquire, as well as the money and the wealth that we spend. And even more so within the Masajid, that it's important that the allocation of this money is done in a correct manner for the needs of the community. It's no use spending money on something which didn't need rectifying in the first place, and money was spent there. That money is inevitably going to catch up with us.
There needs to be justification in place.
Yeah.
People, if money is being spent, people need to be told why it's being spent, how it's being spent, and the process is gone behind it. You just can't throw money at anything and think, yeah, we need to do this. If there's no need for it, there's no need for it. Like you said, it's the money of the people. It's amana. It's a huge trust. And again, like, they probably go on to the next point, but you need people in place who have this sort of understanding of how to utilize money, when to utilize money, and to understand that it's not your actual own money. It's from the people, it's from the community, so it needs to be used in the best manner to serve them.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the other thing is, like, the leadership needs to be active as well, and the other thing is that the society around us is constantly evolving and changing, and there's new challenges that are arising. Now, not just the youth, the elderly, everybody, the whole community is facing. Things like, for example, COVID that's just happened right now. It didn't just affect one group of people; it affected everybody. So the masjid needs to be proactive in terms of being able to deal with the ever-changing society and present solutions when solutions are required. So I think, like, we've talked about purpose and some of the things that a management or leadership needs to do. I think what I'll also mention as a caveat here, that as normal people in the masjid, you aren't absolved of it just because there is a leadership, a group of leaders or management that are in place. You aren't absolved of all of these responsibilities. As an individual who attends a masjid, you should be proactive in helping the masjid and helping the community to prosper as well. We all have our part to play. It's not just we turn around and say he's appointed or he gets paid or he holds this position, so he's got to do it. No, we have to have a mentality of it's all we're all in it together. It's like the example of a boat, in it. Just because the captain has to look after the boat, but if somebody starts to dig a hole in the boat, it's not just that person who's going to harm himself. He's going to harm everybody. And a person that sees the person digging can't turn around and say, oh well, it's the captain's responsibility, I'm going to leave it to him. It's all of our responsibility, and we need to understand that within whatever capacity that we have to
I think this is the mindset that the youth need to start developing now, because the elder generation, they've done their part, and they're gonna maybe slowly move on, and we're gonna be left in charge. And the thing is, if we've not picked up the baton, if we've not learned these things, we've not understood these things, there's only bad things waiting for us. So we need to be proactive in that sense, as well as as youth getting involved in the masjid, helping or facilitate any way that we can, and understanding the things which are in place. Because there's so many things which go on behind the scenes we don't even see, we don't even know, but they're there. But then people are only going to be there for a certain amount of time. Once they've gone, if you've not learned the role, we're going to be the ones in trouble.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a really good point. That's a really important point. But the baton gets passed on slowly as well.
Yeah.
It's not about like oh, I'm going to take that role, or
No.
I'm going to do this. No, like you take on responsibility slowly. You got to think about it in the same way that you might do in a professional environment. You take on a role slowly. You start to take on responsibility slowly. Eventually, you come to a point after much experience where you can then take on a definitive role, and provide benefit. So I think I want to move on now, Kasim. I want to talk about who should be involved within leadership and the management structure. What type of people should be involved? Who should be there?
Okay.
The fly bugging me.
Gonna start? Or?
I'll let you start. What do you think?
Just like you have in any workplace, in any business, in any sort of enterprise, I think you've got to have the right people in the right places. For example, if you got finances, you're dealing with big finances, you need to get the proper accountant. You need to get with the numbers in. If you're dealing with repairs and stuff, you got to know the right people who can fix stuff. You can't just point anybody nilly-willy. You've got to have the right people in places. Again, you're looking at community, maybe people who work with the community outside or in the professional life. Get them in, get people who are professionals, who know what they're on about, who know the field, and let them do what they want to do, and because they are professionals, they know their stuff. Leave them to it. They'll do a good job. Have some trusting people. You've got to appoint the right people.
Yeah. So, I think what I want to explore a bit more is when we're talking about who should be involved within leadership. So, my opinion is, and I know that some people may not necessarily agree with me. My opinion, I believe that there should be a management structure, a committee, or a shura, however it's known, that exists where, for example, there may be board members such as a secretary, a treasurer, chairman, etc. But alongside that and at the table, there should also be scholars. Without the two, I think personally, my understanding is without one or the other, except for in exceptional circumstances, without one or the other, the masjid will fail, or the management will fail in delivering the needs of the community. So I want to try and justify that. So the justification I'll give is, number one, why does a scholar need to be available? Why does a scholar need to be at the table? And I don't mean he just needs to partake in the conversation. No, he needs to play a role, and he needs to be given a role of being heavily involved, because this in an ideal case, this is going to be obviously the imam definitely, right, without question. But also, it shouldn't just be restricted to the imam. There are going to be competent scholars that are going to be within the community as well. It might be like a non-executive role, but they should still be at the table. Because at the end of the day, a group or a community or an organization which is led without the technical know-how of what that organization must complete is ultimately going to fail. I'll give you a classic example, right? I'm a statistician. Now, if I'm fulfilling some form of statistical report or statistical analysis, if there's no statisticians that are involved at the high level of producing the documentation that's required, do you reckon the document is ultimately going to be correct and going to be without any errors? No, it's not. There's going to be errors. It's going to be incorrect, right? In the same way, scholars need to be there at the table to provide the sort of guidance that is required. Maybe we should conduct in this manner or not conduct in this manner, or this particular action which is being suggested, and unfortunately not the way that a Muslim should conduct himself, or Muslims should conduct themselves.
That's what Islam will advocate this, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe this solution that's proposed is not the best of solutions. This solution, on the other hand, is more adherent to Islamic principles. I think this is what we mean. Okay. Now, the scholar's role is to provide the direction to go in, but at the same time, I also acknowledge and I also the reason why I think like a committee should also exist where it's not just scholars is that unfortunately in this day and age we aren't producing scholars who have a wide variety of skills in terms of that can be applicable in the real world. For example, those things to do with like accounting or money. Apart from somebody who has a day job as an accountant or doing something like that, these kind of skills, the imam or the scholar may not have. Leadership skills, these things come through experience. We know those people who we've been under leadership of who have years of experience, and alhamdulillah has been of great benefit. But as soon as you're led by somebody who basically is a headless chicken themselves,
you've never been in that position.
Yeah. They don't know how to communicate with people, deal with people, manage situations, and obviously they don't have the experience as well. So I think that it's important that various people from the community all come together and provide their skill set together, with the scholar providing the guidance, providing the light, basically.
I think I remember listening to something. I don't know whether to mention his name or not. I'm going to mention his name, Mohammed Hijab. He was talking about a scholar in Saudi. I'm not going to mention the scholar's name now. And he said that the scholar was talking about a subject which he had no knowledge upon. Okay, it was to do with how do you say Western science. Okay, science in the West. Okay, and he was making basic blunders. Yeah, that maybe a 15-year or 16 who studied GCSE science had more knowledge of. Mohammed Hijab, he just made the point that this scholar, his expertise in is in a different field, so he needs to stay in his field. And this is like the kind of point that you're making as well. Is that we don't have scholars now who are experts in every single field, and that's fine.
That's not a deficiency.
It's not a deficiency. You've specialized in something else. Nobody expects a scholar to be well-rounded in everything. And that's what we're not advocating for that as well. But if there is a deficiency or you're not an expert in that field, then get somebody else in who can help you. And you can do something else on from a different perspective.
Yep.
I just wanted to mention that because I thought it was very important because some people have the other sort of thing, no, you should only be scholars, but no, scholars don't have expertise in everything. You have to understand that scholars are not perfect as well. Their knowledge is not everywhere, it's in certain fields.
So I think I think this leads to a really good point then. So you're mentioning that a scholar's knowledge is within a particular field. We need to tap into that, right?
Yeah, why did the expertise in, for example?
Yeah. So we need to tap into that, right? Because that knowledge needs to be disseminated within the community.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think the imam's role or the scholar's role should be within the community then? And how should the community treat him? Like I said, for me personally, I think the imam should be at the table in terms of the committee. Automatically by becoming the imam, once they are appointed as the imam, they are then involved within the high level decisions that are made by the masjid and the committee.
Yeah, but this is all subjective now. It depends on your community, it depends on the needs of your community. It depends on your imam, the person that you're appointing, why you're appointing him. Let's be honest, I'll be very frank that most Masajid just want the imam to pray 5 times salah. The imam he's more than just a person who's going to pay you 5 times salah. There's no deficiency in saying salah is the most important thing, in Islam, after iman. But the imam will have so many qualities. He didn't study 6-10 years for no reason. He has his own expertise which he can bring to the table. But that's only if you allow him to bring it to the table.
Yeah. 100%, I agree. So how do we get the imam to bring these qualities to the table, and how do we allow them to basically prosper? So I think the first thing for me is when a person is appointed as an imam, the job description is really important. Okay. Now this is going to vary from community to community. And now, if you're in an area where there's a high number of scholars who have graduated. Okay. In that area, the needs of the imam is going to be different to an area in which there are very, very few scholars who are present. Okay. So, and we need to have an understanding of how that situation is going to work. So, for example, in an area where there will be a low number of scholars, then unfortunately the imam is going to have to play the role of the religious upbringing of, for example, like the children. Okay, he's going to be heavily involved in teaching the children, leading the salah, obviously. But I think generally what happens in these communities is the children become the primary focus, because the thing is, once you lose a generation, then you're in deep trouble. Okay. So generally what tends to happen is in these communities, the imam is the person who's teaching the children, and that's how it's got to be. Okay. But that's fine, that's all well and good, right? But
and some communities need that.
yeah.
Some communities need that because their community is small. That's the main focus.
Yeah.
But that's not for everywhere.
Yeah. So I think like when you're appointing an imam, again, like I'll caveat again, these are our opinions. When you're appointing an imam in an area where there are a high number of scholars, then the teaching of children doesn't become, for me, the primary responsibility of the imam. Why? Because there's others who can fulfill that role.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other people. If there's other people that can fulfill that role, then the imam doesn't need to be there. Okay. So what should the imam do then? Okay. Apart from the leading of salah. Okay. So I think my opinion has always been that education, unfortunately, in our areas or amongst our community seems to stop at the age of like 12, 13.
Yeah.
Right? Beyond that, there tends to be no education at all that's disseminated to those who are older, and they're just sort of told to fend for themselves. By name, I can give you examples of people who, unfortunately, are like youngsters who are deemed to be religious, but unfortunately, their lives are actually nowhere near.
I don't want to name them then.
No. But what I'm saying is that what's happening now within our communities is there's this understanding of Islam is only public, and that way is public. And what's happening in private, be that like behind closed doors, on their phones, whatever, that life is a completely different reality, which is unfortunate. There's so many issues which exist within our communities that the imam should be at the forefront to tackling through education. Okay, the imam should become a respectable member of the society. I've seen communities, alhamdulillah, where the imam is really well paid. And
I was going to mention that, like, you need to, honestly, you hire an imam, bro, pay him.
Yeah.
Pay him a wage where he doesn't need to work a second job and a third job. I'll say
Yeah.
that again. Pay your imam properly. He doesn't need to work a second job or third job. He can concentrate full time on the masjid and he can give his everything to the masjid.
Yeah.
So
I think this is the thing, like, unfortunately, there are many imams who are hired as imams as a part-time basis, but that's what their job description is, given by the leadership, by the committee. But unfortunately, they have to go out and earn their livelihood through other means as well. I've even heard of situations where the Masjid committee have basically turned around and said to the imam, right, okay, we're paying you this amount of money. It falls under the remit of where the government will top you up through universal credit or tax credits, for example. So go to the government and the government will fulfill the rest of your needs. Okay, the rest of your needs. Okay, whilst the masjid has thousands of pounds sat inside of the
thousands of pounds.
Yeah. So that is a really, really derogatory way of looking at that person who is a scholar of Deen, okay, who is an inheritor of the knowledge of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, we need to pay our imams a respectable wage so that they can flourish within the community and provide the needs of the community, which need to be tackled and need to be addressed.
Like, if you don't have value for your imam, if you don't have value for ilm, if you don't have essentially don't have value for Islam, then don't complain about your kids going off the track. Don't complain about your kids being on the streets. Don't complain, because me and you are the problem if you don't have value for this sort of stuff. And this is something that we're probably really passionate about. But honestly, if you don't have value for the scholars, and our kids are like this, I look off, forget it. You don't have value for Allah and His Deen, forget it, man.
I think we can't stress the importance of this alone, because the thing is that when a scholar is engaged in going after their livelihood in other ways or through other avenues, right, you've automatically restricted the time of that scholar. And the thing is, like, I think a lot of people, they look at the imam and they just turn around and say, all you do is just pray namaz. All you do is just come for salah and you lead the salah, and that's it. That's all you do. If we were asked to come on time, right, for every single salah, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Fajr is 4:15 in the summer.
Yeah.
You see how many people turn up to the masjid. Wallahi, even if I'm probably not one who don't turn up to the masjid, you know how hard it is to lead the Isha Salah at 11 o'clock in some places, then Fajr at 4 o'clock, and the Imam's doing that for 3-4 months, and you think he's just praying namaz, bro. It's one of the hardest jobs. People go to the gym and they think they try living off of that blanket in the morning. See how, mashallah, hard and tough you are.
I think the other thing to mention here is, like, we have to look at our own lives and what we demand within our own careers, right? So let me give an example, right? Within my career as a statistician, I expect that I will go through a series of development that will develop me as a statistician, make me better as a statistician through through my employers. So whoever my employers are, I expect them to provide development opportunities for me. Okay. And I also expect that as I develop, my salary increases as well. Okay. That's natural. Like, I'm not asking for something crazy that people don't ask for. This is the norm within society. Okay. So we have to meet that then. At the same time, like, if we are part of the management or we are part of the committee, what are we doing to help develop the imam? We might not have, like, for example, we might not have the tools or the access to find people who may help develop our imam. But the imam himself might be able to, if you said to him and you asked him, look, what do you want to study? I'm fairly sure that he could go to somebody and say, I want to study X, Y, and Z book with you. Or even if it's, a non-Islamic science, it might be that the imam wants to go on a leadership course, and you are aware of organizations who deliver leadership courses. So you can send the imam if you're paying him well, and he doesn't need to go elsewhere looking
And he has the
looking
time.
for his risk. Yeah, and you've given him the time, And the thing is, like, the more that you develop the imam, the more the community will come and gravitate towards the imam as well. But naturally, these things, they take up the imam's time as well. Like, think about it, right? You as an individual, how many times have you had a question for your imam or your scholar, and you've gone to your scholar and asked him a question, right? And to you, it seems trivial. That time seems trivial, that, for example, like, I might go and I might ask a question to my imam after Isha Salah today. It takes 5 minutes to ask. How many people are there in the community that come to the masjid regularly, and how many questions do they have? So how much of the imam's time is actually being used? For you, it's only 5 minutes, but for him, daily, it's probably at least half an hour that people ask him questions. That's not to even mention the point about the questions that he's getting through his phone, the phone calls that he's getting, the text messages that he's getting, to deal with, like, real issues. For example, there might be, like, sisters within the community who unfortunately are going through domestic violence at home, and they are asking the imam for help. But the thing is that if you haven't developed the imam or provided a platform for the imam to go and find people in the right areas, how will the community get better, and how will these problems be removed from our society? I think we really do have to give this a lot of thought. You know, um, and at the end of the day, if the leader is not providing the benefit because we aren't providing the platform for the leader, then we as the group who are following are going to go astray as well. So I know a lot of people, they pin this on the scholars or they pin this on the imam, saying it's you guys, you aren't doing enough. But the problem is it's us, because we haven't given them the platform. We haven't provided them with the tools to prosper. So they can't. They're literally trying to do things with not doing anything. What can they do? Because we've not given it to them. We've not given them the platform. And these things take time as well. It's not going to happen like overnight. You're not going to have something that's, all of a sudden the masjid is going to be transformed. There's going to be courses that are going to be take place. There's going to be people that are going to be coming in from outside. There's going to be development opportunities and things like that. It's going to take time, but it requires, like, people to be a bit more progressive and to give it a bit more thought. And rather than think about the scholars and our imam as, like, basically dirt on their shoes, and some people employees of theirs, then we're not going to progress, man.
No.
But yeah, I don't know. Any more thoughts on this, Kasim?
Well, I think we said.
Okay, so I guess the other thing to mention here then is we talked about, like, leadership, we're talking about management, and what we envisage the leadership and the management to undertake, who they should be, the kind of people that they should be, the kind of things that they should potentially change to get people involved in. But then ultimately, the masjid is a place where these people are going to be involved in, and the masjid is going to be the platform or the place, right? So how do you imagine, like, our masajid being used more effectively? What are your thoughts?
I think first thing I'm gonna say is just opening times. Like honestly, I'll be honest, I hate going to the masjid where it says we close 10 minutes after salah. Like, I hate going to places like, after salah you want to sit down, do your athkar, you want to sit in the masjid, and somebody's saying to you, you got to get out now because you're closing the masjid. What do you have the masjid for? What, just for 5 times salah? It's first of all, we need to keep the masjid open. Second of all, we need to populate the masjid, and we need to run activities where the community is getting involved. Like, it's so sad when I see a masjid. It's so beautiful. They spend, like, so much money on it, but then you go to and it's closed.
Mm.
You know, like I understand that people spend money on the masjid and it's valuable and stuff like that, but don't spend so much money on it that you gotta close it or there's so much security that it's too hard to even open the place. You don't have a simple masjid, where you don't need to have that much sort of security or that much sort of thing for it, where people can come anytime they want. And there are certain masajid out there where the masjids are open for most hours of the day, and people go there. And if, for example, if you go to the Somali community or even the African community, mashallah, they spend a lot of time in the masjid. Like their kids play Quran in the masjid, they run around the masjid, they just play Quran, and that's how they raise their kids. And you see the effect that has on their life. Compared to somebody who just comes to the masjid for families and then just leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, I think we've got to always think about it in a sense where whatever we do, maybe the future generation will do less. Like if you think about it, like the generation that was above us and our elders, they alhamdulillah spent a lot more time than we did.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're spending less time. So if we're spending like the bare minimum, what's going to happen to the generation that comes next? They're not going to be involved at all. And we need to think about this. Like, we need to make sure that our youth are continuing the baton within the masjid to ensure, like, the masajid in this country don't end up like how the churches were, where they become vacant and they get sold off, and other people take over it and it gets used for other purposes. I think the other thing to mention is, like, you've mentioned about opening times and things like that. I guess to mention here would maybe be security concerns, and I think you've addressed that in a sense where if your masjid isn't lavish, then your security doesn't need to be as high. But of course, you also have like other security concerns about the people and the well-being within that as well. But solutions need to be made then. That somebody who wants to access the masjid, how can they access the masjid outside of the normal times? The other thing would be like providing platform for people to do things like the mimbar and the front of the masjid and front and center of the masjid. It's not for everybody, and not everything needs to come from there. The mimbar and the front of the masjid is for our scholars, is for our imams. Okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the only people who speak within a masjid. We've mentioned about like emergency services, careers advice and things like that. These things can also take place within the masjid. Development, learning, classes, maybe about the history of Islam, the history of our people, and where things might have gone right, gone wrong. We can learn about these kind of things. I don't know what else.
I think it's set to go maybe sustain courses. Like let's be honest, in Muslim community there are problems and problems are everywhere. Let's not get away from that. For example, as a youth, maybe struggling with like maybe drugs, pornography, for example. That's another big thing which many masajid don't even address or talk about. Mental health, suicide, even atheism. Even in our community is there. So if you have a place in the masjid where maybe it's like sort of a safe place where Muslim youth can come talk to somebody, and express their sort of problems that they have. I remember this to a sheikh, and he said that if we don't talk to our youth, if the youth don't tell us our problems or that they have doubts and stuff, how can we address them? And youth shouldn't be scared of addressing these sort of things because we're living in a time now where there's just so many doubts. Islam is getting attacked from every sort of direction that youth will have these doubts, and it's normal for a person to have doubts. But the natural thing is that he comes forward to somebody and he talks to somebody who addresses these doubts and gives him clarification, gives him clarity. So he'll go, okay, this is what Islam says, and this is what I've been told, and okay, this is what's right, this is what's wrong. So we need to set up these sort of services, and it shouldn't be like just once a year. It should be maintained, should be a constant service which is there. If we can't provide it, we have the financial needs, then we should do it. And honestly, we should make the masjid. I personally think like a safe space for the youth to come to. That run things from our masjid, for example. Even if the youth go to play football, okay, we're gonna play football from Maghrib to Isha. So everybody come from Maghrib Salah. After that, we'll go play football, come back for Isha Salah, for example. It's just an initiative, and the youth will play with their football, which is nothing wrong with that. And they also play the Salah as well.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack and talk about here as well. I think I want to close the episode here now because I think we've covered quite a lot. I think the last thing that I sort of want to mention here is that at the same time, our Masajid needs to also be catering for our sisters and our women within our society as well. And unfortunately, they've been like heavily neglected. I don't want to talk about it here because I actually want to dedicate an entire episode to this so that we can unpack it, we can talk about it, we can talk about the challenges, our personal viewpoints as well, and what we think. But I think like I'll just mention here a small point on this particular topic is that fitna is fitna, okay? Trials and tribulations and these kind of things are they take place within every society, every era, you know, and there are going to be things that go wrong, you know. But what's worse than fitna is those who basically leave the fold of Islam. If we are contributing towards people leaving the fold of Islam because adequate provisions or facilities are not being provided for them, who's to blame? Are they to blame or are we to blame? I think it's a big point that really needs to be addressed and we need to talk about. Um, Obviously, we are going to have some women who, mashallah, are very strong and much stronger than most men in terms of their iman in Islam. But unfortunately, we know that's not the majority. Um, so I think something needs to be done. Inshallah, we can talk about that in a future episode. Do you have anything else to end with?
I think we leave it there, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Jazakallahu khair for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode, inshallah. We'll see you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.